Good morning.
Good morning.
And we start with a collective incense burning. Everyone do your best. Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. All spacious crowds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all present, we pay homage and offer flowers of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer flowers of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer flowers of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. So today, of course, I always say this, but when I'm asked to give a Dharma talk, usually I think of, well, what have I been meaning to get to? And so today, it is the Six Perfections. So, as cultivators, as we've been working with Buddha Master's teachings around cultivation, development of bodhicitta, we work to develop bodhicitta, which is ultimately, in the ultimate sense, that Buddha mind, right? The mind that knows the emptiness of self and all phenomena. And then the mind that then wants to go and help others, accomplish the same thing, realize the same thing. So when we start out with our cultivation, we start out with things like, recognizing the suffering that we endure, right? We learn what suffering is, and then we kind of start to realize, oh, others suffer as well. And we learn that attachment is ultimately the cause of that. And that if we decide to take up the path and kind of courageously endeavor to sever those attachments that we realize we have and that cause us suffering, and that for those that encounter us might cause them suffering as well, we can realize emptiness and gain liberation from the bondage of our ignorance. And then, having done all that, our experience will then allow us to kind of help others do the same thing. Just like when we learn a skill or a trade or a job or just anything, guitar, once we know it, once we have some experience with it, we can help others benefit by that experience and simplify their path to experiencing the same thing. And that's what we hope to do as bodhisattvas, right? So on the one hand, the Bodhisattva path, is, we should recognize, is all about giving ourselves away. That, once we realize the emptiness of self in all phenomena that we may now think is ours and may have trouble letting go of or even sharing, then we realize that there is nothing to hold on to. There's nothing really that's ours. And there's really no I to own anything in the first place. So all these troubles that we have in this world kind of go away. Like it all just sort of goes away. St. Teresa of Avila says when she talks about her experience in the seventh mansion, that was the culmination of the path. that she outlined in her book, The Interior Castle, kind of her chronicle of the path that she followed. That there's nothing to do now but help others. So realizing that emptiness, and knowing now that there's literally nothing else to do but help others. I've done everything I can for me. There's nothing more to do now, just to help others. So that's that bodhicitta that we're talking about, that we have this, ultimately it's the Buddha mind, in the ultimate sense, but in a relatively a worldly sense, it's an aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of living beings. It's the bodhisattva aspiration. We take up this path because we want to be a benefit to others. And this path outlines a pretty concise way to do so, at least in terms of the literature. So we get to a point where we realize that there is suffering, that we suffer, that others suffer. We learn not to do harm, right? We learn we don't want to do harm to others, because we realize that part of the reason we suffer is others might, either want to or just incidentally do harm to us. So we suffer, so that we don't want to do that to others. And so this path kind of emerges. And then we start to sort of, if we take up the path, we start to realize, this is really benefiting me. I think others would benefit by this. And so this aspiration emerges to really try to help others experience what we're experiencing, experience the benefits of a path that can really take us out of suffering and benefit others as a force in the world for good. So we start out with this aspiration, but at some point, we want to move to, more engagement, where we originally sort of picked up the path maybe to solve our own suffering, where we didn't even realize we were suffering. We thought it would be good for us. We thought we'd listen to a few talks and see what happened. And then we did realize we suffered, and then we said, okay, this is worthwhile. I'll keep at it. And then we encounter the Bodhisattva Path at some point in time, and wow, give yourself away for the benefit of others. Geez, okay. So we dabble in that for a while. And there's a series of practices we can take up, and we make the leap, kind of courageously go in where we have not gone before. And we pick up this practice of bodhicitta, trying to develop this bodhicitta. So we have practices like understanding who my mother is, recognizing and repaying their kindness, the Brahma Viharas, really working with self and others are equal. Self and all the other beings are equal, right? Not just humans. And that requires an understanding of suffering. We're all in the same boat. The desire to benefit others before self, and really even exchange others' suffering for our own. And so all these practices are kind of done, in secret, from our own side. We're doing these things. Nobody really knows we're doing it. Mostly, a lot of this takes the form of prayers, things we do on the pillow, things we might carry in our minds as we walk around our day. And gradually, we do build and strengthen a desire to become a Buddha and save living beings. And we cultivate a real ability to release attachments which prevent us from doing that. So we are we're starting to realize, this self-cherishing, self-concern, the self-protection is really the root of the problem in my attachment to, I and mine, and then all the things out here that I think are mine or possessions are the cause of kind of all the struggle and strife in the world. And that it's all kind of illusory and not really true, and we work with that. So we need to work with those attachments. So the 6 paramitas, or the 6 perfections, at least according to the LamRim tradition, which is something I'll consult from time to time to kind of fill in the blanks. Many of the practices we've been given to make offerings, prostrations, and things like that come out of these traditions. So, but in a way, the 6 paramitas, according to the tradition, are the kind of the follow-on to all the work that we've been doing. It's not like we haven't been practicing the 6 paramitas, but it may not have been maybe a focus. But the way it's viewed in the tradition is that first we develop bodhicitta. We're on the Bodhisattva Path. And then we use the 6 perfections as a way of going out as a bodhisattva and engaging with the world. So it's not just from our side now. We're actually looking and seeking to carry out this bodhisattva aspiration by really engaging. So can we actualize our bodhicitta aspiration through more engaged practice, designed to help us further release our attachment to self and our possessions? All this stuff is for that, right? All this stuff is just different ways for us to get at, and then, kind of escalating ways for us to get at this self-attachment and the illusion that, we have ourselves and we have all this out here. And that if you're my wife, you belong to me. All this is this false notion that we can break down, and that we need to break down, and that these practices kind of help us get at that. And the 6 paramitas, work together, kind of building on one another, culminating in ultimately the perfection of wisdom. Wisdom is the 6th of the 6, and we'll go over them. And ultimately the goal of the path, the perfection of wisdom, realizing that this self and everything out here are all empty. It's not that they don't exist, but they just don't exist in the way that we think they do, with the level of ignorance that we are suffering from. So for those that may not be familiar, the 6 perfections, I'm going to outline them, and we're going to go into a little bit of kind of you could say the science of it, but and we'll go into them and try to get an understanding of how we can use these. But the 6 paramitas are giving and generosity, and they have their opposites, which helps us understand what that is trying to get at. So the opposite of giving and generosity, or charity, would be stinginess and greed. And it's easy to see our attachments when we use those words, stinginess and greed. We can feel stinginess. So if we're working with that paramita, we're going out and trying to practice generosity, we're going to constantly run into this feeling of where we're stingy, which is an indication of where we're attached. So it's nothing personal here, not that we're a bad person. We're trying to figure out where we're attached. The only way we're going to do it is by engaging in the world and trying some of this stuff out, so we kind of run into where we're stuck. So there's giving and generosity, precept observance, and that's the precepts, the 10 wholesome actions, right? Getting at, and their opposites are all our faults and afflictions and the errors we make, the evil deeds we perform out of this protection or defensive the self that we believe so strongly in, that's we're told is not really true. So there's giving, generosity, precept observance, patient forbearance, patience and forbearance, the opposite of which is hatred and anger. Effort, joyful effort, they call it. And the opposite of that is laziness, something that I'm sure in laziness is rooted in attachment. It's attachment to the way we spend our day. It's attachment to the way we have spent our morning. And trying to initiate change there can also often run into conflict. We're attached to comfort, Skidara likes to tell us. So we have to make effort to overcome those habitual ways of being. And then dhyana. Dhyana is that one-pointed concentration, the ability to concentrate, and that's to overcome, and its opposite is scattered-mindedness. This idea that we just let our mind run and rule our day, finish at the end of the day, unable to go to sleep right away because we're still so consumed with everything our mind has generated throughout the day. Can we get to a place where on the pillow we can enjoy some real calm abiding, but then take that experience out into the world and use it to practice mindfulness to give us some calm and some concentrated existence off the pillow. And then finally, there's wisdom. In the ultimate sense, that's the culmination of the path, and it's designed obviously to overcome ignorance. Its opposite is ignorance. It turns out that the order of the perfections, the way they're listed, giving, morality, patience, effort, dhyana, wisdom, can be understood by looking at their order of precedence or their order of dependence, so that the kind of the earlier trainings create the foundations for those that follow. For example, when we develop generosity, we're capable of practicing ethical discipline. Because our wanting to be better players or individuals in the world is a form of generosity. It comes from generosity. It comes from us not wanting to do any harm to anybody else. It comes from us wanting to be better in the world, not for recognition, but just not to leave a footprint. That's generosity. It's rooted in generosity. Through the practice of ethical discipline, we will refrain from harming others and are naturally more patient if they harm us. Ethical discipline points us in the direction of our own faults and flaws. Naturally, then, we begin to be able to see, oh, I know where they're coming from. I have that too. So patience naturally is born from that. Forbearance, the ability to forbear. When someone either seeks to or incidentally does harm to us. How many times have we just like blurted out something and done harm, had no intention to do any harm, but our lack of training brings it about. So we request forbearance from others when we do that. Our husbands, our wives, right? I mean, we ask for, listen, I'm cultivated, but I'm not going to be perfect. I need you to practice forbearance. And I'll practice forbearance with you. If we're patient with adversities, then we're more likely to practice diligently with joyous effort and an attitude of perseverance. Patience leads to diligence. Joyous effort. We're starting to kind of feel a sense of contentment. There's patience. Things don't bother us as much. We're starting to feel like, this feels pretty good. I kind of like this. I'm willing to do more. So diligence, and we learn to actually enjoy our practice rather than feeling like it's something we have to do or get through. I'm kind of in that process now. Once we pick up something like offerings, particularly something like a water offering, each day when you wake up, that water needs to be changed. New water needs to go in. If new water goes in, you need to go through a series of offerings to consecrate that water to finish the job, right? The first thing is put the water in, but you got to finish the offering now. So this is a change to how I'm spending my morning. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I've got things to get to. So we've got to work with these things. But arriving eventually, hopefully, at a place of joyous effort with an attitude of perseverance, where we start to really sort of see the benefit in doing this. That we really, really, really want to make an offering because we know the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are there for us. We know that there are living holy beings around us that are there to help. We know that. We begin to experience that. And so we really, really want to make the offering, and we're so happy to do it. The same way we want to help others, we feel like we get help too, and we're grateful for it. So then through perseverance, we naturally attain meditative concentration due to our overall experience of contentment. We're arriving at a place of contentment. We're okay. Pabongka here, the last 2 days, just to show you how they, in the tradition, how they look at the 6 paramitas. He went through all of the preliminary practices and stages of the path, originally developed by Tsongkhapa, right? In a 22 or 23-day retreat, much like Buddha Master did when he gave expounding. And it's in days 21 and 22 when he talks about the 6 perfections. It's at the end. By now, you're a bodhisattva and you're walking this out. And so you need these things, and they're going to cycle, and they're going to develop and escalate and advance you. And they're going to work together to bring about a sort of a compounding effect. But he treats the first 4, generosity, morality, patience, and effort, separately. And then meditation and wisdom, and it is the next day, separate thing. And you can see how that could kind of work. I'm working with laziness. My ability to sort of overcome that is going to help everything. But that's where I'm working. Now, it's not like I don't meditate. And it's not like that by my cultivation and my meditation that I don't have insights, so wisdom arises. It's not like that's not happening. It's not like I'm not doing all 6 of these already. But they do work together. And so it's interesting to me to see how they laid it out. And there's 3 different books that I consulted. One of them is up on the shelf there. By Kensei Rinpoche, the sacred, I think it's called the Sacred Path. Then there's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by Pabongka Rinpoche. And there's a book that I can't show you that's on my Nook that is called the 6 Perfections, and it's by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I've mentioned him in the past because he wrote a book called Bodhicitta. He wrote a book called 6 Perfections, where he covers the 6 perfections. And he wrote a book called Patience. So he takes patience and works and gives that specifically. I find his books to be extremely readable. Like, you can really enjoy reading these books, and they fill you with the essence and the spirit of whatever he's giving. Where some of the books can be those books, 30 pages just on generosity. So I said, great. So when I got this task yesterday to do this Dharma talk, I said, great, I'm going to do the Six Perfections. And I know there's a ton of content in that book. And I have that book, right? So I'm all set. By 11 o'clock at night, I'm so overwhelmed. I had decided earlier that I was only going to do generosity because it was so big. And I couldn't even tackle that the way it was laid out. So I said, oh. And so Lama Zopa Rinpoche's text was much more concise and helped me to lay this out in a way that would be useful for all of you. And was useful for me, honestly. And that's a book that I've been meaning to read. I read his Bodhicitta book, at least most of it. It was extremely useful. What is bodhicitta? You know, we learn these terms. We come into this path. It was like emptiness. The first time I heard emptiness, oh God, months of, the heck is that? Google, unsatisfactory answer. You know, just, the heck is that? So bodhicitta is like that. So I read Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, and he gave me a real sense of what it is to have a mind of bodhicitta, which was so helpful. Now I knew what I was doing. Great. And so he does the same thing with the Six Perfections. So, and then the stabilization of the mind through meditative concentration gives us the ability to better experience the ultimate nature of reality, which is wisdom, right? So each thing kind of builds from the thing before. Then, of course, they can kind of work backwards too, where I see in my own practice that when I learn something, I'm sitting and I have an insight meditation, man, am I motivated, right? So that perseverance, no longer a problem, no longer a problem. So we're going backwards now. Well, can't wait to meditate again. I'll definitely do it. And I don't care if I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if I was up all night, had to go to the bathroom. Don't care. I'm doing it, right? So the benefits go both ways, up and down the stack. The first 5 of these are considered methods. So methods are things that we practice, and of course, wisdom is the culmination. There's the ways to try to get at wisdom. And so we do contemplations and we try to penetrate ideas like this precious human life and impermanence and those kinds of things. Those are valuable practices. They kind of, wisdom practice and meditation kind of go hand in hand. Because if you start out trying to contemplate one of those ideas, you might actually get quiet and then sit with one of those ideas. Sit with how that feels. Oh, wow, I see. Wow, this precious human life, I really, really, really see it. And you might be quiet by this time. So sit with that feeling, sit with that. Stop mind, just sit with it. And so you can end up in a meditative concentration just through that analysis, what started out to be an analysis. So I wanted to go through these. And kind of give a sense and just kind of talk through. And for me, as I'm exposing myself to this, I know that I've got this 2-pager that I developed at one point to make sure I had handy the 3 poisons, the 8 worldly winds, the 5 lay precepts, the 10 wholesome characteristics, the 6 paramitas, the all embracing bodhisattva virtues, right? These are all the Buddhist things, and we would run by those 6 paramitas just like it's just another list. So I thought I'd take a look at least how in the tradition they think about these things. and how they're seen to be useful. But remember that, particularly this first one, and I'm at the point where I could really just focus on generosity for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. I already know I meditate. I already know that I make effort to get up and do those offerings and then follow on with I'm doing those things. So we're working these simultaneously, and that's what Buddha Master says, right? That the Bodhisattvas are working these things, simultaneously all together. But we can pick one, and since giving and generosity is a foundational element to really perfecting, we're getting at perfecting these things. We're trying to get to perfecting these things. The perfection of wisdom is the perfect, not understanding, but realization, penetration of the emptiness of self, the emptiness of all dharmas. And that, if we had that, then we would be perfectly generous, right? Perfectly moral, perfectly patient, right? There would be no problem with effort. Because we would know there was no compromise to be had. This is our mind now. Coming out of today, I will focus on generosity. And it's easy to do because we see ways that we could be generous, and then we might give that some thought. As Buddha Master says, think it over. We might think it over. And we may or may not, end up sort of going there. So there's plenty to work with. And it's easy because it points directly. Once we learn to feel our attachment. Now, in the beginning, a Buddhist practitioner would be just like, what do you need from me? And it kind of makes sense. That Dharma talk was good. I'll come again, right? But, what are we getting at here? But when we start to really learn to sort of feel our attachment inside, in the body, then these things can really help, because now we have the tool, we have the monitor, we have the sensor, we have the instrument. The instrument works now, so we can go out and sort of throw ourselves into the world and go, saw that, not ready for that, but saw it, might write it down, log it, right? Keep a log. So we're releasing attachments. When we're talking about giving generosity, we were talking about releasing attachments. So this one's powerful. This one's really powerful. Not surprising, it's first. So it's the mind that desires to give fully of one's own resources without any attachment. As bodhisattvas, we've mentally given away all our possessions and have no attachment to anything. We should feel that whatever we give to others is already theirs. So if we were able to achieve that, that would be the perfection of generosity. Until we understand that this self is empty and that all that stuff we care about is empty, we probably won't achieve that perfection. But this practice, giving in generosity, will help us get to the thing that will help this become perfect, right? So these things are working like gears, like spokes on a gear, spokes on a wheel. So we can focus on giving generosity with material things, physical or mental things. That includes making offerings to Buddhas, and really trying to sweeten that aspect of, I'm not just going through the motions of something I learned because somebody told me I have to do 100,000 of these, right? In order to sort of get the next thing, whatever the next thing is. But I really, really, really want to sweetly be offering something. For what, these beings represent. So the daily offerings that we might do count. So the offerings can be mental, they can be physical, our possessions, things we have. We can offer fearlessness, right? We can offer our wisdom and understanding. Really, we're bodhisattvas, right? So whatever I read, well, I can guide others from fear and danger. Well, I tend to read that first as an ignorant person, but then realize, no, we're practitioners. We've been at this a while. We do have some wisdom. We do, right? We have the Dharma. So we can potentially guide others from fear and danger where we see that they might be ready to go off and do something that wouldn't benefit them. We can suggest an alternative. People have a lot of strong opinions these days. We can offer, and they get really worked up. I see it in the gym. You know, there's certain guys that like to talk each other around the weight machines and whatnot, and man, they get really worked up. And, you know, one time, one of the guys was essentially bragging about, you know, how he is untouched by it all. And, you know, that's his thing. And so he's not, you know, worried about anything. I said, yeah, well, kind of the way I try to approach that myself is by looking at, you know, my own faults. And then that gives me insight into sort of what's happening with other people. And I tend to kind of leave them alone. So that's a way you can kind of, he doesn't know I'm Buddhist. I didn't say anything about Buddhism, right? But, you know, rather than just let other people kind of grovel in their, you know, these minds that are just, you know. So guiding others from fear and danger, preventing others from endangering themselves or others, giving medicine to help with illness or advice to free them from anxiety. We do this stuff all the time. It's happening in the ordinary world too. But part of the reason we're using this stuff is to develop ourselves as bodhisattvas to be the ultimate benefit. Because short-term benefit of helping someone who can't see kind of the right view around a certain thing, kind of get through that one thing, well, the next thing's going to arise. You may not beat it. So we really want to help people have their own wisdom. We want to teach them how to fish, as they say. So, you know, we have a different perspective. And the Dharma, ultimately, living beings need Dharma to be truly free. And that's the greatest gift of all. It's not just sitting up here. It's ways that we can offer our wisdom without them even know we're offering anything that they might take issue with. Right? We've had the mind. We have the mind. So we know what we can possibly run into. And so skillful means we learn to avoid obvious pitfalls, mostly from the perspective of how we are. That's what we know right now. So giving and generosity. And then what follows is morality, ethical discipline, kind of overcoming those afflictions or faults, our errors, our tendency to perform poorly. When situations arise that threaten us, or you know, that sort of thing. So we have practices. We follow the precepts. We have the 10 wholesome actions. Right, my sheet. Abstain from killing living beings, sensual misconduct, all kinds of different speech, false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, gossip, coveting, ill will, all these things that when we learn to avoid them, you know, it's funny, in the beginning, it looks just like a list of, what do you want from me? Come on now, everybody does these things. But man, there is freedom. There is freedom in not saying things that generate reactions that you then spend the rest of the day worried about. There's freedom in that. So you learn to appreciate that, you know, even these early characteristics and precepts were for us. They were for us first. They happen to be a benefit to whoever we encounter, but they're for us. So moral ethics, so abstaining from non-virtue is one of the ideas. Ripening our own mind, gathering virtuous deeds, specifically to develop bodhicitta. Again, back to the idea, what are we doing? We're bodhisattvas. Listening, reflecting on dharma subjects, making offerings, all the ways that we ripen our mind, sweeten our mind, offering service, practicing these 6 perfections, or any of the cultivation practices that we have. Ripening our mind. And then working for others, temporary assistance with problems, but also lead them to the Dharma so they can learn to solve their own life problems. So people are struggling with all kinds of things, especially now in the climate. We had a big storm, lots of people helping people. Ultimately, everything will kind of go back to normal. The next set of problems will arise. Ultimately, as bodhisattvas, we'd love to find a way to kind of get them plugged into the Dharma so they can run this on their own. But initially, we can show an example, I guess, of what this looks like, even if they don't know how we spend our time, how we spend our mind. And, you know, this working for others, when we are trying to work with others, one of the themes on the list is the 4 all-embracing bodhisattva virtues. And that's giving to create stability, so one can focus on the Dharma. So maybe there's some short-term problems that we can solve to create stability. Maybe the person needs clothes, they need food, they need housing, they need a job. And so maybe we're involved in that kind of work, and we can help them kind of create that stability so that they can actually turn to something like the Dharma. Speaking kindly, sweetly to others, you know, to sort of so they'll trust us. I mean, nobody's going to buy into anything we have to offer if we're kind of mean and challenging with, come on now, wasting your life. Yeah, right. That's not going to work. So we watch our demeanor, how we are, and we do that whether we're trying to, you know, work with them or not. I mean, if we're bodhisattvas, we kind of need to watch our reputation. Otherwise, you know, I was sometimes my, you know, I'll say the old me, but I'm still me, right? So comes out and I'm like, oof. Yeah, straighten that out. Otherwise, they might find out I'm a Buddhist. They'd be like, that's what a Buddhist is? Come on, right? So we have an obligation to how we show up for others. Teach the Dharma according to their level and capacity. So it may not be the Dharma at first, might be just some good advice. And practice what we're teaching. Really be the example. So that's all morality, ethical discipline, overcoming our faults and afflictions, and those things they say that cover us up, cover up the knowledge of our true essence. So then there's patience, which is now, by this time, we've been working with generosity. We see that's not easy. So when others are stingy, we might kind of be patient with them.
Joe, is that the fourth? Is that the fourth?
It's the third. It's the third. Patience is the third.
The second thing that we were talking about, the 4
things of the Bodhisattva.
So the first, giving to create stability. The second, speaking kindly.
The third is teach the Dharma according to their level and capacity, and with this practice what you're teaching. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So then patience. So all that work with morality and our own ethical discipline has taught us what our own faults and afflictions are. But we naturally become patient, more patient with others. It just leads right in. If we hadn't done all that, then we think we're great. and we're just constantly judging against us. That's horrible. That was really good, right? And so, but as soon as we start looking at ourselves through this practice of moral discipline, we naturally develop patience. You see how it follows. So disregarding the harm by others is one of the ideas here. Not retaliating. Realizing that without others to challenge us, we wouldn't be able to practice patience. But we're grateful for those that might challenge us or express hatred towards us, or those sorts of things. We get to practice patience, forbearance. So this leads to kind of no hatred, no anger, no enemies, no enemies. It's not actually possible for a fully realized bodhisattva to have enemies. It's not possible. Because there's nothing for them to lose, protect, or defend. It's really not possible for them to have enemies. But we have to practice to get there and perfect that. So and then accepting suffering. I mean, until we're liberated, we will suffer. So we need to accept that, understand it. So not to be surprised or upset that others might cause us suffering. You know, we suffer. Others might cause us suffering. We're all operating from the same level of ignorance, different levels, but same kind of ignorance, the things that cause problems. So in accepting suffering, it's easier, you know, as we practice patience and learn to temper our reactions to what arises. We learn to bear suffering patiently. So we can use patience to work with suffering, our own, and then just, you know, when others' suffering overflows onto us. And that's why forbearance is part of patience. And then part of this is gaining certainty about the Dharma, being convinced of the crucial importance of attaining enlightenment and being certain about the path that leads there. No doubt. No doubt. So part of patience to me is leaving off the striving that has us wanting to jump ahead of what's happening right now. So that I'm certain with the path that I'm on, I'm certain that by doing the practices that have been prescribed, like medicine, after a while I gain experience that this is working, it seems to be having a certain effect. I can see certain attachments that I had that I kind of don't really have anymore. Seems to be working. So I gain confidence and I have no doubt. So I'm able to be patient with the path and not impatient and jumping ahead and creating obstacles for myself. So we went from giving to morality and ethical discipline to patience and forbearance. And now we're certain we're on a path that is leading me somewhere. I have no doubt about it. So I apply joyous effort and persevere in the practice. So effort, perseverance. So one of the ideas here is, this is like armor, right? That we must protect our minds at all times. Because the mind is the source of either our happiness or our suffering. So we must protect our minds at all times. Shantideva said, a person that does not guard the mind cannot keep the precepts. I love when things are stated as equations. I like that's an equivalency. A person that does not guard their mind, that lets all kinds of stuff in, lets themselves be influenced, inevitably, that stuff's going to bleed out of them in actions, in speech, in what keeps them up at night, right? This internalized anger we get, turn on the TV, you see what can get you, what can grab you. Careful, careful. This mind is extremely absorbent, extremely. To a benefit when we're talking about the Dharma and really kind of getting at this stuff. Mind's very powerful, but it's also very powerful to take us way down into tracks that are not beneficial. So we've got to really, really guard the mind. Gathering virtue. Joy in practicing the Dharma. Shift from that grudging practice. Darn, wish I'd never started these water offerings so I could just leap out of bed and go make my tea, right? I mean, so, you know, and start my day and you know.
You can't do tea first?
No, I can't. That's just
What?
bad example, bad example. Run off to the gym, you know.
The tea ceremony prior.
So shifting from this grudging practicing to putting the attitude on joy in practice and really trying to, you know, offer joy and doing our practices with joy. I remember this, you know, my 20s and 30s and the path that I was on at the time. I really looked forward to my meditations twice a day. Really looked forward to it. It was the highlight of the day. Wouldn't miss it. For a period of time there, right? There were certain practices that we did. One of them was this big long chant. It was called the Guru Gita. We used to do it as a group once a week, but I took to doing it at home. My parents would go out on Saturday. I lived at home. My 20s. My parents would go out on Saturday night, and they were always gone for church, and then they'd go to dinner. They were gone for a couple hours, and I would do this Guru Gita chant out loud in my room, sitting. It was a form of meditation, so it was designed to be really a one-pointed focus. It was in another language, Sanskrit or whatever the language was, and I learned to really look forward to that, really love that. So this is possible. So I know this is possible, you know.
So we have a question online.
Oh, sure.
Fatima asked, what are the antidotes for lack of patience?
Lack of patience.
Patience.
That's rhetorical.
Practice. So when we feel ourselves, so the antidotes to lack of patience. So lack of patience would lead us towards hatred and anger.
Or judgment.
Or judgment.
Yeah.
And the antidote for lack of patience would be to practice patience. And so for that, if you said, well, what is patience? Then I can recommend Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book on the Six Perfections in the section on patience. I can also recommend the book that he wrote specifically on patience. And that's what I did with his Bodhicitta book. I'm like, what the heck is Bodhicitta and what attitude does that connote? Because all I ever see is generate Bodhicitta. And it's like it's like a sentence. You know, I vow to, but. And that didn't do it for me, so I needed more. Can you guys offer?
Well, I was wondering if non-discriminating mind fits in with a way to get to patience. So I'm letting go of my opinion, my view, what I want.
Yeah, good,
Yeah,
thank you.
Myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I'm experiencing lack of patience.
Yeah, we'll just speak a little bit loud because our camera is small and it's right on the tip of the.
It's actually this.
If I'm experiencing lack of patience, and then I have to become aware of it, number one. And then secondly, I go inside and attempt to find the cause of the lack of patience. Is it because of something I need to do now? Or is there some other cause? And only in discovering the cause of lack of patience. And when I find that, to then let it go, then I'm able to come back to patience. But every time it's due to a thought that I have that's impinging on patience. So to ignore it doesn't solve the problem. The only way to solve it is find out what is causing that lack of patience and deal with that.
And you arrived, by that analysis, you arrived at an attachment or an attachment to an outcome that's causing.
When you discover it, then you have a choice to detach from it or not.
Yeah, chances are we have a preference towards how we want this to go. It's not happening fast enough. That's where the lack of patience is. What control do I really have over that? Do I really have to get to that next thing, which is maybe not even leaving the house. I'm not even on a deadline. Right? Yeah. What is the thing that's rising up for us that's causing us to be impatient?
It can go deeper. Why do I have to do that thing? And in other words, it isn't just a 1-2 answer. It's what's underlies that, and what underlies that, and what underlies that. And once one gets to the very bottom, then that issue is gone for good.
And I think you just touched on this one theme here under patience and forbearance, accepting suffering. So getting to that.
Does Fatima have any input on that question?
No. Another
Did you ask
antidote.
her if there was something that she was thinking about with
No.
regard to that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Another antidote is to remember impermanence and to have a mind of impermanence. So he talks about in the Vajrayyoga Perfection Dharma, if you lack patience, you will have evil hindrances, which could be anything. So when you realize, like Supa said, you have to realize that you're acting impatient. You have to know that first. And then an antidote could be that this is impermanent and that you could die today. And so to act with patience could actually be the gateway to freedom.
And one antidote to impatience could be practicing patience in the Six Perfections.
Do you have something?
Go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, once you understand the cause of impatience, then it's the first two paramitas, right? Generosity and ethical discipline.
Because now you have a choice.
Because now you have a choice.
Yeah.
So I think, the paramitas are, as you said, listed in an order for a reason.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
You also have to.
Did you say when you realize that you are impatient to go to the first and second?
As Sukha said, when you realize why you're impatient,
Okay.
then go to the first and second.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, did you want to speak? If you could come a little closer, Rob, just because the microphone's here.
I speak this from the place of someone who has a PhD in impatience.
Move closer.
There you go.
I speak it as someone who understands impatience deeply, and you can, in my experience, based on my mind and my karmic understanding, you can spend a lot of time like why and what are the causes and the conditions, and kind of run the hamster wheel, or you can turn your mind towards your aspiration. But you got to see it, and you have, and even like we're talking about all this stuff, but for me, I have to get more granular than that. Like impatience arises. What is that? It's resistance to what is.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I can either put skillful attention on my aspiration, or the feeling loop, the thought loop, the perception loop. And then from that, the unskillful actions that I partake in. So it's really just when resistance arises, can I remember my aspiration? And at that moment, where is the attention? Wise attention is moving in the direction of the Dharma, remembering that life is impermanent, that there is this mind right now that's craving something to be different than it is right here in my own heart and mind and in my external circumstances. And the freedom that we talk about is, for me, it's like in that moment. Because if you're, somebody who's married, like you say something, then you spend 3 days chasing it backwards. Who wants to live like that?
That's right. Thank you, Rob. Go ahead, Jim.
Rob just cued me to something that Tanya Deepa said a long time ago. And that is, in thinking about when we actually do recognize that something unwholesome is arising, the Buddha's instruction is to simply abandon it. Not to resist it, not to struggle with it, but simply to abandon it. And turning toward the aspiration is right on the heels of that and reinforces that abandoning of that unwholesome.
Yes, thank you.
That come out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I
Great.
love how we just came up with
Yeah,
10 different anecdotes.
Great question, Tom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
which then reminds me of our previous conversations over the past couple of weeks about dependent origination. And how do we be able to gain the awareness and the ability to cut it off between feeling and craving? Because the more we get into that, from the feeling and then into the craving is where all that impatience and the anger and all of that starts to come in.
Yeah, because once we have the feeling of impatience, we still have a choice.
Right.
Once we
Always a
engage
choice.
with it,
Yep, always a choice.
yeah. Go ahead.
So I appreciate this. And this goes back to when we were discussing generosity. And I'm, for me, gonna link both of those together. There are times and spaces that I have the generosity and the patience that is a strength. Think of what I do. I mean, for 32 years, to be able to deal with that and the families and to be a generous supporter of all of that is Sukha and I were talking about this on the way over, to be able to have that kind of, or whatever your gift is, to present to the world. However, there is a circumstance in my space right now, part of it I'm very patient on, part of it is the impatience, and like we were speaking is, okay, why am I feeling impatient? Not angry, I'm not an anger-based person. Fear, okay, now Panawati, hi, it's fear. But where is that fear from? It's from vulnerability. Well, where is that vulnerability from? Well, part of it with dealing with my home right now is, yeah, I have to be patient. It's gonna take a long time to get it back. However, underlying are other issues coming up for me. Where is that? And it's the security that I didn't have as a kid because I got kicked out of so many damn houses that when mine has problems, there's this horrible feeling that underlies all of it. And yet, I can be so generous and patient with every other step in my life, but not be able to do that in this moment. And I know that that causes suffering for Dave, who's in the same slime issue we are together in this right now, and his mom, who he can't go see right now because we've got so much going on, so that impedes others. But when we talk about this, it seems so easy to take that and step it out in certain dimensions until samsara slams right in your face, the last damn thing that might be your impingement from being able to know something, and then to have the forbearance with myself and the patience with myself and the fear lying right there in myself, and to realize I don't know anything about a structure of a home, which is very earth-based. And to be at that standstill and not think, well, I haven't killed my parents, so I'm not the worst Buddhist ever. And I can laugh about that and realize this is where I'm at, and this is hard, and this is where it is. And to look at the underlying structures of all of that and it's all about attachment. And it's been a really damn hard friggin' month. And you know, but to realize that and to sit with that, but to realize, and yet in the strong suit of my essence and pure being, I'm still walking out the one gift that I truly believe was my karmic gift beautifully. And yet there's the one, and I will tell you that yesterday Upward Christian Fellowship came to our house and cut some of the trees that are down, and the Baptist mission is going to come and help us cut some of the trees that are down. And when I spoke with them, as they're praying with you, it's so beautiful because we came to this beauty of whatever it is that we read, whatever it is that we hear in a talk, whatever it is that our aspiration is, they are walking out right now exactly the finger pointing that Jesus gave. They are taking Jesus's words and they are cultivating that. And those of us who are in a different religious stance are doing everything we can to walk out the path that we have been pointed to by the Buddha. And I find that beauty in the cultivation everywhere I'm looking right now. That it's not about what book are you reading, what psalm was this, what is it? It's that everybody step by step is walking out the exact path that we've been shown to do. And I find such beauty and hope in that moment. So about the patience, sometimes it's easier to be patient with others and generous with others. And it's not so easy to look at yourself and go, yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So it occurred to me during all of this discussion as well that I said that I was kind of choosing generosity to go out with, right? You're looking into this with me. So this is my beginning point. I choose generosity to go out. Fatima might choose patience. Walk that out for a while. See, maybe pick patience and go with that. They all tie into one another. Ultimately, so it's not like if you pick patience, you're gonna be missing anything. You're gonna run into generosity or the lack thereof. You're gonna run into, so ill will and yeah. And you need to overcome your ill will to be patient.
I think sometimes just the cognitive piece is, it's hard to be patient when I just need to know an answer, even if the answer sucks. I think there's also that, the attachment to at least needing to know, which is a completely intellectual stance.
Mm-hmm.
Like sitting in that Bardo space and just needing to know something. That's the hamster wheel.
Yeah, I just need to know. Or I can't do what's right in front of me until I know the answer to this.
Yes.
And I'm ready to do this thing right in front of me. In fact, I'm dressed. Where's the answer to the question? So I can decide if I'm having to turn away from that and shift gears. I'm ready to do that. So the patience is there. Yeah.
Joe, I just want to say one more thing. So an element of that is the aspiration, and the other place is looking at reality. Reality is a very important component of the structure.
Yeah.
And being able to then generate what it is to reach our aspiration.
Yeah, the whole Bodhisattva, the whole path, and the culmination of wisdom is to see things as they actually are.
Right.
We have names for them like emptiness and that kind of thing. It's to see things as they actually are, not in the diluted way that we do now.
Right.
Yeah.
In a fearful maybe way or panic way, but really taking a look at reality.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Is it okay
And
to
I'm
say something?
thinking of the latter part of the Heart Sutra where after you've learned this and this and this and this and this and this, he says, and it's all false. It is all false. It's an illusion.
Yeah, we're kind of tricking this mind that, oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Which if we really get that, is freedom.
Yeah.
It's amazing how we can step into that space sometimes, and how much harder it is when you're like, I was there, I touched that so briefly. And then when you are no longer there and step away from that space, but you know that it is right there, how do you manifest that right there? Like knowing I've been there, not there, that dance too, I think, and that's not necessarily in this talk, but also that kind of, that's something as well.
I had that exact experience.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Wait, go ahead.
Someone responded. They just said, I had that exact experience.
Excellent.
The morning of the flood, you know.
Who's speaking?
I probably shouldn't be.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't know. They said I probably shouldn't.
Oh no, but if you were
That's
able to
because she's
switch
on
from
Zoom.
your
She's on
Bluetooth
Zoom.
headphones to the actual speaker on that thing, we might be able to hear him or her.
Hey, everybody, just this is such a beautiful Dharma talk. It's such a beautiful and so timely. You know, it's so powerful how we are given opportunities to practice. You know, the morning of the flood, I live on Riverbend Drive, so I got to see the water coming, and there was nothing to do. It was total surrender. You know, there was a waterfall behind me, the hill behind me, and the river coming up, and I saw my neighbor drowned. I saw my car float away, and I got afraid when I was trying to escape. But when I surrendered, this amazing thing happened. There was nothing I could do. There was nothing I could do. I put on some swimming clothes, you know, but there was nothing else I could do. And I watched in that moment, just letting go of everything, my car, my house, even my life, and the peace that I felt, the incredible lack of fear and peace that I felt. I thought, is this the Dharma? Is this the practice? What is this? You know? And I'm just listening to all these, you know, this beautiful talk and the amazing comments. And I think that we get opportunities in our practice to find out where we are. And whoever was speaking before, it is inconvenient. You know, that day was easy. It's harder after, but everything to me is the practice now. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
You touched some wisdom already.
That was it.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your help and your input. Wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Talk in the direction that it took might not have been your intention, but it took exactly what it needed to. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
But we may never know the good we do.
I think that's the beauty of non-attachment, no giver and no receiver. Is that assuming that whatever it is that we do transpires, that passes the torch and keeps the light, irregardless of whether or not we know whether or not we were part of the flight.
Feel good, forget about it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Let it go.
So the next is dhyana, concentration. So now that we've gained all of this stability by the first 4 paramitas, now we don't wait. Again, we practice meditation, whether we practice meditation regardless, but those first 4 paramitas give us a sense of contentment and stability that allow us that when we sit, things don't come up. Snakes don't, you know, come crawling out to say, you let me in, I'm here. we guarded our mind, we worked with our patients, we were generous when we could be. And now we can sit and we can truly enjoy and some calm abiding. So dhyana concentration, this is calm abiding conjoined with penetrative insight that leads to the wisdom of understanding emptiness. Deep meditative absorption free from discursive thought. It can be one-pointed or analytical. So for instance, one-pointed meditation might be on a mantra or the breath, right? And we use that to get single-minded where there's nothing else happening. That's one way to meditate. That's kind of how I meditated in the past, was with a mantra. And then you get to a point where you're so quiet you don't need the mantra anymore. And so you'll just let it go. But then if the thoughts start coming back, you pick up the mantra again and you go. That's a way of practicing one-pointed meditation. But we do a lot of contemplations where we contemplate an idea, we analyze an idea, like impermanence or something like that. And I've seen, so I mentioned probably in a prior talk that I added back to my morning series of practices, the 7 joint preliminary practices. And there are times when I'll get where I know I don't have a lot of time that particular morning. I want to make sure I do my Dharma practice, and I might skip those 7 joint preliminary practices. Well, guess what? The finding there is that when I get to the end of my Dharma practice, which is a meditation, if you will, right? It is a meditation where I will get quiet. That I'm not as effective at that point than I would have been if I had the quieting of my mind from analyzing the 7 joint preliminaries, because I get quiet during that time. Then when I go into the next section, which involves several pages of reading, I'm already quiet. In fact, I could have just stayed after the 7 joint preliminary practice and just gone into a single pointed meditation. So, and how do we penetrate these ideas like precious human life and impermanence? Well, if we are contemplating one of those ideas, if we really, really have a strong sense of what that is and or the benefit of it, or wow, yes, this precious human life, they recommend sit there. Don't move on. Stay and experience the penetration of that idea. Stay with it. Let it be the one thing. And so it's another way to getting to that one thing. So they call it the conjoining of samatha, which is that one-pointed type of style of meditation, and vipassana, which is kind of the analytical style. And we can move from one to the other. I've seen where I get quiet enough in the meditation portion of my practice that I can introduce an idea. I can bring somebody into my space. I have this big space now. I can bring somebody in that I want to focus on maybe affecting their illness. Maybe they have cancer. I want to sort of bring them into my space and let them benefit by this pure energy that seems to be, at least to me, seems to be apparent, seems to be available. Let me bring them in, let them benefit by it, let their cancer dissolve in the face of it. In the past, when I meditated, I wouldn't dare introduce a thought because it would seem like it would disrupt the whole thing. So it's like when you got quiet, you just stayed there. And if you got active again, you use the mantra to quiet the mind, quiet the mind, quiet the mind. So this is new to me, this idea that I can be active to some extent in my meditation and possibly use that with the aspiration of healing or to penetrate an idea. And I think the conversation in the old Dharma hall, in the cafeteria of the old Dharma hall around meditation, and I remember, Suki, you were involved in this conversation. Venerable was there, and I was talking about meditation, and then And then both you and Venerable both sort of seemed adamant that once you get quiet, now you introduce something that you can penetrate, that you want to penetrate. And that was a novel idea to me. And I think I'm just arriving at the possibility of that. That it doesn't necessarily disturb the quiet to do that. So you see, we come along by and by from wherever we are, right? Individuals.
I'd like to just say something. We had many comments from many different people this morning, and it reminds me that we're all seeking the same goal. But each one of us has our own unique path. And all the paths are perfect for the person that's experiencing them. And it's so easy, and I admit this, for me to think, but my path is working so well, I want you all to get on my path. And when I hear you're not on my path, I feel so bad for you. And then I realized, oops, to really value the excitement of each person who is so deeply, truly moving forward on that path. Whatever that path is, that's the beauty to venerate and be grateful for.
Yeah. And we've all got our own afflictions to overcome, and that varies uniquely between every single one of us. So, you know, we have to work with, if we're trying to work with others, we have to work with truths. And we have to thread that needle between sort of how we do it, which might not work for them, and simple truths that can inform and maybe help to alleviate an element of suffering that they're encountering. But we have to stick to kind of the truths, and we have to have some of those truths. And so from working with the Dharma, there are certain inalienable truths that arrive to us and that we sort of walk out, but that we can share with others as well. Go ahead, Rob. Yeah,
Well, no, I have a question for you. So one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to deepen into language processing, right? Which is our understanding of the principles of the Dharma, or even more detailed is our understandings of the functionality of the universe, right? So then that part has always come pretty easy to me, right? And one of the things I'm realizing now where I'm at, my cultivation, is to begin to learn what contemplation really is, right? What I'm hearing you say, like what you just expounded, basically, I want to make sure I really understand this. What I'm hearing you say is that one has to enter into the field of stillness until the actual field becomes pregnant with stillness. And once that field is impregnated and stabilized, then we begin to enter in these ideas or principles so that the field can bring forth something that opens up the way reality lives, is experienced, is I don't know, words don't really, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I understand this, because he's basically saying that in order for you to go into a place which is the reality state of Prajna, right? That's the stepping stone. But you have to know that, right?
Yeah.
And you have to really know what that is, not as, oh yeah, I'm gonna sit there and kind of mentally chew on an idea when my thoughts are running and I'm creating karma, because that's what a mind that's craving forward does. And we can practice in a way where we're creating more craving. If you approach your Dharma practice like, this is something I gotta do, this is someplace I gotta get, I gotta go, I gotta it's a checklist, like, I'll do this,
Yeah.
And that's not it, right?
Yeah.
And so he tells a lot of people, he being Buddha Master tells a lot of people, like, you haven't even started to cultivate because you don't really know how to contemplate deeply, and you think that your dharma or your sitting practice is just running towards more with the mind of craving. And so what I'm asking essentially is like how you see contemplation, and if it's just what you said, you know?
Mm-hmm. I remember you're reminding me that some time ago, Venerable was starting to sort of teach us. I think she was teaching us some preliminary practices. Maybe it was the 7 joint preliminaries, but she was stressing, first get quiet. And she was having us use the breath to stabilize our minds before we started the practice that we were talking about. So yeah, Venerable has stressed that as well. Yeah, first get quiet and then. And I find that the contemplation of an idea or these ideas quiets me further. We're going to give space to these things. You know, when I do my prostrations, I don't know how other people do their prostrations, but if you're impatient, you'll be like, hey, aren't you supposed to be doing prostration? What are you doing standing there? And it's because I'm setting up a field, right? I'm setting up a field and I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm generating and maintain that concentration through the physical practice. Which is, the experience varies every single day with, the first prostration, then the second one. With my mind go on that one, I'll get it on the next. That's why we do multiple of any of these. But to make that effort to get one pointed with what you're doing is a prerequisite for all of the practices, whether they involve using your mind or you're trying to get to that calm abiding.
I see contemplation, I see language prajna and analysis as the head, the mind. Contemplation is the heart. And you can analyze till the cows come home. But it's the heart. And you can't make the heart open. It opens. It's said that if you contemplate deeply, if you analyze deeply, at some point, if you do that very well, you will break through and your heart will open and you will know.
Just know, right?
But you can't sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna know. It goes through the analysis first. And the more you do it, the quicker it happens. So you have to develop high abilities of language prajna, but also not be attached to it.
But then it's, you said it though, but then it's the daily practice is really where we reap the benefit, because we're not starting over every time as if we haven't seen this before, where we gain momentum. Okay, we're talking about wisdom now. So that's the last one. Overcoming ignorance. So that the perfection of wisdom is the realization of emptiness. This is required, this realization of emptiness, this ultimate perfection of wisdom is required in order to penetrate the other perfections. So as long as we have something to hold on to, or some delusion, we cannot perfect the other 5. So it's like if we had this, then, so you can see how they work together, and that, as soon as you get down to wisdom, you back up to the top. Even when you're deciding, okay, I'm going to be generous. Who am I to be generous? Who am I being generous to? What's the situation? What's required? Am I the right one to do it? All those things are wisdom. So wisdom is feeding into our generosity. It's feeding into kind of not overdoing it possibly with our morality practice and cutting ourselves a little slack. Enough for today, the sins of this day, right? And that kind of thing, that's wisdom talking. That's wisdom talking and developing in the background. So they refer to, in the traditions, they refer to special insight, right? The ascertaining of the non-existence of a personal self and the ascertaining of the non-existence of a self of phenomena, right? So phenomena doesn't have its own existence either. And penetrating these truths by direct realization. And one of the practices, there's a variety of practices that they talk about in the wisdom section in the various texts that I reviewed, but one of which we do, which is seeing things or seeing life as a dream. We do that, a bubble, an illusion. Things exist, but not the way we think they do. Realized the emptiness of self and the emptiness of dharmas. So we practice impermanence. But seeing life as a dream is kind of like that too. You could use that. You could practice that. You could sit and that's the first thing that comes up in the 7 joint preliminary practices for me. And it really gives me a sense of how, and especially if you look back at your life, how it really is almost like a dream. That there were we were almost like all these different people. And that dream started, and it went, and we were this person, and we went after this, and we had that. And then after some time, that wasn't true anymore. We moved on, and then, we became this career person, and we had this, and these things sort of arise, and they subside, and they arise and subside. Much like a dream. Much like a dream. So, like I said, hopefully this is helpful. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you all so much. Even online as well. Thank you. You made this into something useful, I think. So hopefully it's been useful. But like I said, I'm gonna choose generosity as something I'll carry out and start to notice for myself. So thank you all. Can someone close for us? Offer merit? Now that we know we can hear you. This is all a big experiment with the audio.
May the benefit and merit of our practice, if there is any, be shared equally among all beings in all realms. May all beings be free from the bounds of samsara. May all beings experience joy and liberation from the penetration of the Dharma. Be free from suffering and come to their true, pure nature and Buddha essence in this lifetime.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to go.